Good afternoon, everyone. We're really pleased to be here this afternoon. I'm Cindy Koss, Deputy Superintendent for Student Learning and Achievement. And with me today also is...
I'm Robbyn Glinsmann. I'm Director of Gifted and Talented and Advanced Placement here at the State Department of Education.
So today we're going to talk about every student an active learner. And you will notice at the bottom of this page, there's a link to a Google folder. So all of the content that we're talking about is also in that Google folder, so you can have that as a reference. And if you don't capture it right this minute, we'll also have it at the end of the presentation. So let's begin. We have two main goals for today. And the first one is that we really want to share with you different techniques so that you can actively engage your students, and that means engage their thinking and engage them emotionally so that they're really active participants with their learner. So we hope that what we're sharing today is helpful to you. Here's the basic agenda. We will have a few slides at the beginning just to share with you the background research and why this is important. And then we're going to show you in a little while a packet of strategies, all of which are available in the Google folder, that you can create yourself and put together so that you can use those in your classroom. There are 4 areas or particular techniques that we're going to share today. One's called hold-ups, one's on the spot, movement, and then going just a little deeper with concept analysis. And at the end, we hope that we'll be able to have time for reflection. The top corner of this slide shows you the book that all of these strategies are based on, and that is Total Participation Techniques by the authors Himmel and Himmel. And what is important to know is that they began this research with English learners. And part of that is because it provides a way for your reluctant learners, for those who maybe are not willing to speak right away because they're unsure of what they're going to say or how that's going to be perceived by the others in the classroom. So these active participation and cognitive engagement tools really are techniques that counter teacher bias and helps ensure equity and participation for all of your students. So the guiding principles are every student should be given the opportunity to really engage and really share what they're thinking. We know that we are better together, and the differences in our background and collective experiences really help all of us better understand certain concepts and really help each of us grow in our understanding as we move forward. So, as we're looking at this particular slide, this is part of the research, and it's the total participation technique called the ripple. So why is that important? Because what we're trying to do is make the learning space safe for all participants. We want them to be able to be actively engaged, but I think we might recognize that sometimes in teachers' classrooms, the teacher will ask a question and then they will toss it to a participant, and it's sort of like the beach ball effect. So one participant responds, then it goes back to the teacher, and maybe 2 or 3 respond after that. However, sometimes we may realize after the fact that a lot of the students are still trying to figure out the question. They are not responding because they're not even sure what the context is. So using the ripple, it really gives all students a chance to respond individually first to a prompt. So that's where you would start. And then after they've had an opportunity to think about the question, they can then go to their peer and have face-to-face or shoulder buddies and talk about what they think and move forward. So all of this is building the opportunity that every student has a chance to respond and every student is engaged. And then the third is that volunteers or selected students may go from there, but it is all about starting with the individual student as we move forward. So let's just think about what the ripple is and what the ripple is not. So the ripple is a way of posing questions so that their actual learning time is available to each and every student. And it's a way that all students can respond. And sometimes that might be using something like a quick write or some of the other ones that you are going to see as we move through today. It is particularly beneficial for English learners, those that are socially tentative students, and students with special needs. What it is not is what I spoke of earlier, that beach ball effect. So a traditional Q&A session, calling on an individual student for an answer, and then being finished. So you really don't know, you don't have any way of figuring out whether the students really are engaged in the learning and where they are in that learning process. So it is not doing something that's intimidating or putting students on the spot. So it's really all about intentional learning, and it's not about the activity itself, but that you really are trying to gauge where students are and where you need to go for next steps that will be helpful to them. So with that in mind, one of the pitfalls is that many activities can be engaging and fun for students. And, the student will go home and say, boy, we had a great day today. And the parent will say, what'd you learn? And they'll go, I don't know, but I got and I moved around, got to talk to my friends. And so it was a lot of fun. But what these are meant to be is that they are engaging and the students enjoy them. But the idea is that the teacher selects the content goals first and then selects one of the total participation techniques to meet the content goal, so that it's really very intentional and that it's all about the learning. The activity is how you present the learning, but you want the activity to be able to provide some evidence of where the students are and where the next steps could and should be for the students. So as we're looking through, I mentioned before that in the Google folder, there are some items that you can prepare ahead of time and have for the students so that they can use them on a regular basis. And so in just a minute, we're going to change the screen a bit, and I'm going to, or Robbyn is going to, share some of the things in this, and we're going to actually be using some of these today and hoping that you can respond in the chat box. But what is the purpose of this? It saves a lot of time so that you can use these tools on the spot, and they can be used in any content area, but they help facilitate the discussion and facilitate the engagement of students. So as we're looking at these, one is called hold-up cards, and these are something that are true, not true. And also we have some other ones in addition. Maybe you're going to have some questions and they choose whether it's A, B, C, or D. And then following will be the discussion where you bring into the cognition piece. Processing cards, sometimes you will want the students to be thinking and processing. And so they will have a card that says still thinking. But when they have completed and are ready to share, they flip that card so that they are actually ready, and you can gauge when the students are ready. Of course, you need an activity for those students that may finish more quickly than that. We also are going to be using something that are called content-related charts, where you're responding. The activity we're going to be doing is related to the 3 branches of government. And then within this also, we have something called a bounce card. The bounce card, for many students, they really have some thought, but they don't know how to start. They don't know what the sentence structure should be that they can start. So you may have, and Robbyn and I are actually going to model this a little later, but this helps them summarize their thinking or talk about where they are. So all of these are meant to be tools that help you do something very easily, and that is all in a folder together. Something called an appointment card, and we'll be talking about that. So All of these, again, are in that Google folder, and we will be sharing some of these techniques in just a moment. So, the first category of techniques are something called holdups. So, we will be asking you to respond to something in a minute, and although you don't have your letter cards, we hope that in the chat box you may be willing to respond as we're moving through these, since we're not face-to-face at the moment. And then the true, not true, and multiple choice. So here we go. So I'm going to give you some information, and all of these activities we're trying to connect to what you actually do in your classrooms. So in thinking about students in our classrooms today, these are some statistics that we have. At least a quarter of students drop out of school. Unfortunately, every 9 seconds, a student drops out. We know the most at-risk students are African American, Latino, and Native American, and their dropout rate is twice that of their white peers. 3/4 of state prison inmates are dropouts, and we know illiteracy is rampant among us. So what does that mean for us? So if you actually had your letter cards, this is what you would be using. And here's your question. What do you think is the number one reasons students give for dropping out of school? These are your choices. And after I read them, if you would be so bold as to put your response in the chat box. A, students were failing and the requirements were difficult. B, students left for personal reasons, to go get a job to help support their family because of bullying, a number of reasons. C, students were bored, classes were not interesting. Or D, students missed too many days and could not make up all the work. So if you're ready, put your response in the chat box. Gary was brave and gave us an answer, I think.
Yeah.
And Mandy to everyone. So we'll wait for a moment. Okay, we have another one. I love this because we have almost all the letters in the chat box. Okay, all right, well, moving on. So this is, remember the question was the number one reason students give for dropping out. And the number one reason dropouts give is boredom. Students want engagement, they want hands-on learning, and the opportunity to debate and discuss. And that's what we believe these techniques provide. Now, does that mean that all of those weren't reasons for students dropping out? Of course not. Those are all reasons that we know and that we have seen in our schools for reasons of why they're dropping out. But what we're suggesting here is that the number one reason is the boredom, that making the classes more interesting and having students engaged. So we know that this unfortunately is a learned behavior, and the more disengaged they become in early grades, more difficult it is for all of us as teachers to engage them again. So the next hold-up question that we have for you is, we have 5 statements. And so these 5 statements, we ask you to identify whether it's true, true with modifications, not true, or unable to determine. So in your chat box, if you would number your responses. So number 1, if there is high engagement in a class activity, there is high learning. Do you believe that's true? True with modifications, not true, or unable to determine? Okay, question 2. I'm going pretty fast, but you understand the process. Beach ball questions engage all students. True, true with modifications, not true, unable to determine. 3, total participation techniques allow all students an opportunity for cognitive engagement. 4, speaking and listening activities support deep learning. 5, building a TPT conducive classroom requires intentionality. Okay. I'm not going to see all of those, but we're going to look at them. And the first one, if there is high engagement in a class activity, there is high learning.
Which one would you pick, Dr. Koss?
Which one would I pick? That is a good question. I would pick true with modifications. And I will share my reasoning because this is the most important part of all of these. Many of these could be done and have no discussion or follow-up. But the key is that there is discussion, that students' voice is heard, and that is a key part of these participation techniques. So why do I say that? So I said true with modifications because, as I gave the example earlier, you can have high engagement in a class activity and kids can just be happy and talking with each other, but they may not have learned anything because the goal wasn't identified, because there wasn't follow-up with the students asking them, so what did we learn about this today? That kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to do one more before we move on. So number 2, beach ball questions engage all students. So this is the idea where a teacher tosses a question to the student, a student answers, and maybe then the teacher tosses it to 2 or 3 students total. So does that engage all students? So I have someone on here unable to determine. I have a not true, and
Another not true.
another not true.
And another not.
Another not true, not true, not true, not true. Okay, so if we were face to face, and it's a little difficult with the chat box, but I would ask the person who said unable to determine. So I think that is probably thinking about the context. I think the quick answer is not true, considering that if you are tossing questions and not involving all students, it really depends on the question.
It does.
So that would make a difference. But I think you understand why this can be important, why this can be on the spot kinds of questions and a technique. So moving to the next. And this is, I want to say one more thing. Another way to do this activity is to have this on chart paper and have it up on the wall or on a smartboard and have the students put Post-it notes in the boxes. So then you can kind of get a sense of where students are, and it doesn't have to be that there's only one right or wrong answer. We're really trying to get students to think about what their response is and why they think that. So for example, the unable to determine based on information learned. So if you leave that up on a chart paper or something like that during a lesson, maybe when they learn more information, they might change their answer. So all of this is really to help students know it's just not about a right or wrong answer, that thinking's involved and looking up other answers is important.
I also would think, Dr. Koss, that as you hear the reasoning of your classmates, that you may be able to hear a different perspective you didn't bring
That's
into
right.
the conversation. And so you may change your answer based on more information that
That's
was
right.
provided by a classmate.
So that's really the point when we're talking about engaging all learners. This is for another example, multiple choice. We're calling them holdups. Each of these are pictures, so you would have a card, and so those are my examples, where you would respond to some questions about the legislative branch of government. So the first question is, which branch is also called Congress? So the students would hold up the picture of legislative branch. The second question would be, which branch has people who are appointed by the president and approved by the Senate? Well, there's only one left, but the judicial branch. So you can see that the first two are questions that pretty much have a right answer. So here's the third question. Which of these 3 branches would you say plays the biggest part in ensuring a balance of power? And then you ask the students to defend their answer. So my answer would be all 3. However, you might have some different responses, which would be fine because again, you're trying to get the students to think about it, be able to defend their answer. And it's a lot more engaging if you don't say there's only one right or wrong, that they do have to do that thinking and defend. So,
and by scaffolding those questions, you've given them time to think about the problems that are being posed, the roles of these different branches. So then they're able to really have a basis of understanding so they can defend their answer at that point.
So we are now, just in summary, the holdups are a way for interaction with the students. And if the teacher is following up with the reflection piece, that is so critical, not just to do these as an activity. Again, it goes to that intentionality and whether this can be something that is really developing cognition. And studies indicate that response cards are useful for improving this participation and on-task behavior. So they're not only effective when they're used as part of intentional learning goals, but are labeled for the students what the actual learning is. So the next category is on the spot. So there's some things that we can do when you have a lesson and you feel like, well, perhaps the students aren't engaged, but we want them to be engaged with a concept or what's happening. Then we can use processing cards, quick draw or quick write. I'm sure many people do that. Something called chalkboard splash, and many people also do think, pair, share. But I will add the last one, which I actually learned from a first-year teacher when I was observing his classroom. And what he said was, before they do the pair, share, and maybe speak to the other ones, they write down why they're doing that. So it's that writing piece that is added. So processing cards, and this also is something that's in your toolkit that we talked about a little bit earlier, whether a student is still thinking as they're processing. And that's important to know for students, that this is a safe place. You're going to allow me some time to respond. You're not going to say, who knows this answer? So I think that's really what we're talking about most there. Quick draw. So this is a way, and I read something recently, that no matter how much of an artist you are, just the fact of drawing and bringing in that part of your brain really is helping you frame how you are summarizing or really connecting. So that's the importance of that. Select a big idea or a major concept, and then ask the students to reflect on the meaning and create a visual image that represents that. So this is my attempt, because I couldn't draw this, at a visual image. I did this summer at Engage, and one of the examples, which I really liked, someone drew a picture of an ear and a picture of a mouth, and had the arrows connecting both of those. Because the question was doing a quick draw about student engagement. And so that was their way of showing that. There were many others, but that's the easiest to explain. And I think the other difference is, I don't want to go there. You use this as well with quick write. So I think it's very nice to give them the choice to do quick draw or quick write. Maybe there's some words that can help them better describe that. And maybe it just comes more easily to them to use the quick draw. So I think that's a really important point, that we want to give students as many different ways that they feel comfortable explaining what they're thinking. Chalkboard splash may be a little new, but what this one does is allows the entire class to see all the responses from their peers. So you may say it's similar to a quick write, and you may include in your packets Post-it notes or index cards or something like that. So there is a sentence starter, and then the students generate their responses, and they can put them on chart paper, or they can have them on Post-it notes and put them on a chalkboard, any different ways of that. But the question could be just as simple, if this is like an on the spot, it could be as simple as, so what's the most important thing you learned today during this lesson? And then the students can all put their answers on there, and that will share their observations and be engaged. So as you're thinking about it, my question to you would be, if you want to put something in the chat box, how do you engage your students? And you could suggest a way intellectually, emotionally, physically, socially, or culturally. And if you want to, you could even use one of the techniques that we've already shared today as your response. So let's see if we've got some answers in the chat box about how you engage your students. Do you use a quick draw, quick write, any of those kinds of things? Word clouds, polleverywhere.com. Excellent. Okay, thank you for that, Michelle. And interactivity on the whiteboard, the quick draw, quick write. Perfect, Crystal. Thank you so much. So as you're doing this, what's really great is this is really helping kids feel safe to put up their answers. Anything is accepted. But then as the class sees all of them collectively, the debrief is, what are some similarities? What did other students learn from this unit similar to you? What are some of the differences that you didn't think about? Or what's a surprise that really does make a connection to the lesson? And the kids are then, this is a great way to help kids summarize important points, but it engages all of them as they are thinking about the lesson.
I really like what Crystal added in, is doing a gallery walk.
Oh,
so now
that's
they
excellent.
come back up and see all the responses of their classmates.
Yes.
They're able to think about things and maybe even have a few Post-it notes in their hand to add some more ideas. Again,
Wonderful.
building upon the learning that others have contributed.
Thank you. That's excellent. So the next is involving movement. And we know that movement really engages the brain. And we also know, whatever your age is, sitting for a long period of time, more than 15 minutes probably, is difficult. And so this is engaging them maybe with writing or talking, but getting them up and moving. So this list is several things. We are going to talk about the first three that are bolded. And many of you probably have used this. It's really not something terribly new, but it's called an appointment agenda. And you would have times on it like 8 a.m., 9, 10, and so on. And that doesn't mean the time in your class. What it means is, who is your 8 a.m. partner? Who is your 9 o'clock partner? And so on. And it's a way of pairing students. But one of the key things for pairing students is that they cannot have the same student each hour, because you really want to make sure that they're talking with different students and getting different perspectives, because that's part of it as well. And this summer at Engage, one of the teachers shared that what they do is they have partner cards. So they have these already made out, and they randomly pass them out to the students. So partner cards could be milk and cookies, green eggs and ham. It could be macaroni and cheese, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy. It could be a variety of things. But that way, you randomly are having students partner with each other, which is another way of engaging them and helping them really meet other students in the classroom, for particularly reluctant learners. So bounce cards, and this is also in your packet. And when we're thinking about some of our reluctant learners, or whether it's someone who's an English learner, someone who's special education, someone who's gifted and talented because they're not sure that their answer is correct, which some of the perfectionists, that's an issue. So it gives them something to say. And as we're going through this, we are talking about having sentence frames. And so you might read a couple off that card for us.
So a couple ones say, oh, that reminds me of, I agree because, true. Another example is when, or that's a great point. Always that a person could respond to someone else. And sometimes we don't always understand what the person is saying, so the listener needs to summarize. So they could say, I hear you saying that, So if I understand you correctly, or I like how you said, so ways that they can sum up that, or ask a question. If I didn't fully understand what you were saying, I may want to ask a question back to you, but I'm just not really sure how to phrase that. So I could say something like, can you tell me more about that? I see your point, but what about? And lastly, have you ever thought about? So great ways to give students just the place to start, and they can fill the content in.
So the example on this slide, a strategy I used in my math class was holdups, where each student had a whiteboard and held up their answer. And it's a quick formative assessment where we could see if they got the concept. And then Robbyn might say in response to that,
can you tell me more about how that worked? How many students got engaged during that process?
So Robbyn shared with you some of these examples, and that's what we're talking about. If you have a partner there, you might try this, but it's really important, particularly for English learners and the other reluctant learners that we talked about, that you give them some tools to make them feel comfortable and that they have something to look at. One of the other suggestions is when you're doing this kind of thing, sometimes you might have word banks with some of the key concepts that you've been working on, so they have a place to go. So you're giving them all tools so that they can be engaged and feel comfortable in that engagement.
My favorite part of it is it also gives them an avenue to disagree with someone. So if I have a different perspective or a different point of view, I have a very kind way of saying that and being able to talk about disagreements in a mutually respectful way.
That's a really good point, I think, because I think we're trying to teach students how to have conversations and be able to share their opinion in a positive way, appropriate way. So the next for getting up is called 3 threes in a row. So this is meant for students to interact with their peers and get their peers' feedback on what they should write in boxes on a template. And I don't know how well you can see it,
Yeah.
but Robbyn's holding up an example of that. And again, you have an example in your folders. So what do you do? First, you prepare 9 questions based on whatever concept you're teaching. Then students walk around the room and ask their peers to explain 1 answers. Students then summarize that response and put it in a box. So then you discuss all the answers as a class. But let me give you this. So here's an example. If I were to ask each of you to look at these 9 requests for an answer. And so I am the one holding the card. So I'm going to hold the card and I'm going to say, Robbyn, can you please share with me, can you explain how you plan to implement at least 2 of these that are new to you your next school year? How might you do that? I have the card, and then I would need a pen to write down and summarize what Robbyn has to say.
So I really like a new idea about the true, not true, having more than, because there are gray areas sometimes, and I think true or false is a very polarizing idea. So this gives students some wiggle room to really explain. And then I also plan to implement the ready to share or still thinking, because processing time does vary by student. And I want to make sure that students aren't rushed to get to an answer because their classmates are finished.
So if you're in the chat box and want to share any that you would like to share that you're planning to use in your classroom coming up, but let me point out something that's really important. This is like bingo, where you go around the classroom and you have students put their initials in a box because they can give the answer. The difference here is the owner of the card needs to summarize what they heard from the other person. So that is engaging them cognitively. It also requires the person who is sharing to summarize what they have learned. So it really is giving an opportunity for both peers to have that learning process going on. So that's why this is different. But you would do that as you would do some of those bingo cards that I'm sure many of us have used, sometimes to get acquainted activities or a variety of other things. But this has that intentional purpose for concept building. So the next example is, and this might be fun if you want to try any of these, this came from North Carolina's math problem solving deck. Robbyn, you should like this one.
Oh, I love this. Can I do all 9?
So I actually have tried most of these myself, and I can't remember which one I was going on. I don't really know how you do that. But each of these, again, are giving something where it requires an answer, but how did you think about that? So that would be part of the summary. And obviously the box would be larger, you know, than what's here on the screen. But I'm curious, which one should we choose to see if anyone wants to do in the chat box quickly? One that's pretty easy is the far left column bottom. 4 children are lining up. Their names are Lynn, Bill, John, and Mary. Lynn is first, Bill is last, Mary is behind Lynn and in front of John, who is third in line. I actually figured this one out pretty quickly, so I was very proud of myself. But this is probably what? I don't know what grade level this is. Third, fourth?
Probably second. Yeah, second. Or third.
So, you know, that was good. One of them that I'll be interested if Robbyn has an answer, maybe not on the spot, but the 6 coins were 51 cents. What coins do you think I have? Is there more than one answer? Well, I figured out one answer. I didn't try to go beyond one. I was just pleased I found one answer. But you can see how this can be engaging. Also, if students are trying to figure it out together and they're walking around, maybe they're partner buddies, and together that's what they're trying to do and explain how they got to the answer as partners.
What a great way for discourse, because mathematics is one of those topics where there are multiple ways to arrive at the answer. So many times we focus on getting the right answer, but we don't talk about the process to get there. And we isolate many students in our classroom because we don't reaffirm that the way they received the answer or they got to that answer was just as valid as their classmate or the way the textbook arrived at the answer. So this is a great way for students to share their thinking, create a discourse in the math class, and hear other reasonings that could be applied to future problems they're learning.
So I love that. I also like the one in the second column on the bottom, and it's talking about different shapes. Which shapes will stack? Which shapes will roll? I just think that's wonderful, and then explaining your answer. So we'll move on to our second grade example. Then the next one is concept analysis. So trying to figure some things out. Feature walk, someone talked about a gallery walk. This is very similar, has some intentional purpose to it, and 3-sentence summary. So we're going to go to the feature walk. Now, many times textbooks have these great graphics, or they have pictures or tables or charts, and they're often overlooked. However, their purpose is often to help with comprehension. And so this is a way for students to have that opportunity. So it is like a gallery walk. So a teacher would make a copy of something in particular from a textbook and would have several of these around the room, depending on what the unit was. And then the students would have a silent processing minute, and they would respond to a prompt that the teacher was asking about. And it might be, you know, how does this help you understand the topic? Or what's the message that's being conveyed? Or what clarification do you need? And how does this connect to the topic? So this is the one we have for you today. So that will be your question as well. Total participation technique quadrants. So we know that in any classroom at any given time, you may have low cognition and low participation. You may have low cognition and high participation, very engaged, but not really learning. You may have high cognition, but low participation. That could be a lecture. You could have high cognition and high participation, and that's what we hope for as we're doing this. So this is the question to you. How does this better help you understand the idea of total participation techniques. Or you might also think about which quadrant do you think is the best or most connected to total participation techniques. So we're going to look at the chat box and hope you have some thought about that. So which one, or what does this do to help you better understand TPT? Do we have any from the audience here?
Wait time is just as hard virtually as it is in a classroom.
It is. Good point.
Yeah. Still thinking. I like, oh, look at that.
I love that. Someone said still thinking.
So
that
virtually they
perfect.
showed their card. Mandy, that's a great job. Thinking through a classroom, you could go through all 4 of these quadrants in a day. You could go through and they have their place, but we're thinking, where is the ultimate spot? Where do we want to be in to stay so that all students have a part of learning, all can participate, and all are comfortable participating because of what we've done in the classroom?
Because even in number 3, the high cognition, low participation, you have to have some time to provide information for them to think about, or for them to react to or respond. So I really like what you said about that.
So I like Michelle's answer. We want a 4, and I'm thinking a lot of participation, just not sure. So that's right. We do want to stay in that 4 with that participation. But like Dr. Koss said, sometimes we're in that 3 as the students are taking it all in before they can participate with the information.
Right. Because they have to be thinking about something. And so they need some kind of content, whatever that might be.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So again, these are some prompts that you could use for whatever content area. And that's what these are meant to be. These are open-ended. And so, of course, you can figure out some that might be more specific to your lesson. But these are ones you could always use that give you for any kind of graph or chart or whatever that might be. So we're beginning to wrap up. We're getting closer. So 3-sentence summary. At the end of a lesson, you might ask students individually to summarize what they learned in 3 sentences or less. Then have students get in small groups and discuss and refine their summaries. So what are you doing? It's that act of writing down first, and then it's that discussion with your peers about what you have learned so that you are moving forward. So today, we're going to ask you in your chat box to summarize today's learning in 3 words or less. 3. Even 1 word, we'll take it.
3 words, wow. It's a lot harder than Twitter. Man, 3 words.
Of course, I have some down on my paper, but I don't want to.
Oh, I like that. Get students talking.
Oh, that's awesome. Get students talking.
What a great summary.
Yes. Or it could be individual 3 words. Is another way of looking at it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a phrase.
So it's all about interpretation, right?
Lots of ideas.
Lots of ideas. Oh, excellent.
That's great.
Okay. Do we have one more? Okay. So whenever we do presentations, we really hope that it's something that will be important to all of you and that you will be able to take back and actually use. And so one small thing is what we're asking, if you will, take some time to think, but that you will do to support alternative education learners in your classroom. And this actually is something that teachers have put together, one small thing about how to do it. So here's the criteria. It should be something manageable. It should be something specific. It should be something that you know when you've done it. But most important, it's something that matters to you, that you're going to do this because you think it's going to help. Oh, and we have engagement and attendance, going back to our 3 words. Love it.
And your one small thing is something that you take away from this. Many times you'll have a specific student in mind or a class in mind that really is coming to the forefront, that you're thinking, this is what they need, or this is what the engagement will help in that class with the learning. So as you think about that one small thing, also think about who that small thing is going to affect.
Okay, so I will look over the resources and find something that will work for me. Perfect. I like that. And sometimes this one small thing, it does take time to process.
It does.
So that you go over this, and just as Robbyn said, thinking about one student or a couple of students and how you want to engage them. So I really like that.
Or sometimes it's just looking through that Google folder and all of these resources there and figuring out which one will work best with the students you have, and what works best with these students may not work best with another class or another year.
Exactly. So. And support my 3 teachers on here as well as my others in engaging students in a setting. That's awesome. And I'm going to ask Robbyn if she'll hold the book up, which is underneath all those papers.
Yeah.
And this book has like 51 different ideas. But I have heard the authors on podcast, and this is a message I want to leave with you. Their goal is not that every teacher uses all of these. Their goal is that you find maybe 3 that you can use consistently, because this will help with the structure of your class and the interaction of the students. So the goal is that you find what works for you, just like Robbyn said. Because even if you teach the same class multiple times during a day, every class is very different. And what you've done for period 1 is not going to work for period 4. So that's also something to keep in mind. So we appreciate that. So as we end today, we really would like your feedback. And as I promised, at the bottom is also the Google folder access. And, feel free to put some things in there as well. But if you wouldn't mind, we'd really appreciate if you would complete at least 2 sentences to provide us feedback on this webinar. So today was perfect because today would have been better if I were in charge, we would have done this. Next time, I hope and I'm leaving feeling. So if you would do that, and also if you have any questions, we're happy to answer any questions if you have any in the chat box.
Don't mind me, I'm still figuring out what 6 coins can be used to make 51 cents.
It only took me 2 tries to figure it out.
Yeah.
I should have brought my answer. Well, I was just wondering if a math person would figure out more than one. I wasn't sure how they could do that. I guess I was just grateful I figured one answer out. Okay, and we have, today was perfect because it gave me more ideas than I can use in my classroom. I'm leaving feeling encouraged. Yay, love it. I'm leaving feeling ready to adapt these to a virtual setting. And we would be interested, because honestly, that was one of the questions we had, because I've done this several times face to face and walk around, and I have that conversation, and using the chat box was the next closest thing I could think of, with Robbyn's help, for how we could engage today. So yeah, that's really great.
I do think these are easy to print out. So as you're using them in a virtual setting, if you have the 2-way camera so that they can see you and you can see them, you do have that accessibility. And these are easy, that some of these could be recreated on Post-it notes or index cards, so the students could do it in their own setting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any questions for us before we close today? Well, we will go to, there are some research and resources that will be available. And here's contact information for Robbyn and for me.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.